Hi everyone, it's Britt here, Atheist Spiritual Director at Neuroscience Spirituality. I'm here with Pepperoni, and today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest changes that I made in my life that helped me go from suicidal nihilism to now thriving and not having to believe in anything unbelievable or do any spiritual bypassing or optimism or positive thinking in order to get there. And it's the story about your life and the story that you're telling with your life. So in my worst time in the void, my story, the narrative that was always running in the background of my brain would have sounded like this. I was born out of religious duty. While growing up, my mom was emotionally distant. My father was controlling. I formed my identity in school, where I realized that no matter how many times I moved, I could try to be the smartest in the room and gain an identity that way. So in religion, I wanted to be the guy who always said, actually, and do like the most impressive apologetics. I was good at it, but this skill turned on itself. And the more I learned, the more I realized there's no correct religion, no God, no truth outside of my bias. Everything here is a construct. All I see is icons on a computer because of evolutionary fitness. And what's worse is that in order to live, things have to die so that I eat. And I don't have free will, so I'm in this violent, biased robot in this system that says life at all costs. Evolution doesn't care if I'm happy. And then our sun goes out and we blow up, and none of this was for anything. If there was a big red button, we should push it. This one I really believed, because life shouldn't exist like this. The most moral thing to do would be to push the big red button, but if you don't have that, then to at least end your own life. But I can't, because people don't know this, so they won't understand why. So I'm just going to walk around like a hypocrite. I'll steal if I want to. Who cares? Morality is a lie that companies can use. Companies can use slaves in order to make chocolate, but then tell me it's wrong to steal. It would have been better for none of us to have been born, for me to not have been born. I wish I was dead, but I'll pretend to be human and go through the motions because people care about me and they won't understand. So that was kind of rough. That's like a little bit of a rough starting to this video, but I want to be brutally honest about this channel, about what my honest thoughts were during that time. So that was my story. That was the story that was always running in the background. And no wonder I was depressed. No wonder I had zero motivation. I could barely get out of bed. It was rough. And therapists couldn't help me in this place because they couldn't say anything that could withstand the kind of philosophical issues and questions that I was dealing with. They were trying to give me ways to maybe like reduce my anxiety, but I was dealing with whether life itself is justifiable, which requires a lot more philosophy than most therapists have. Medication only really numbed me. The only thing that really did help was changing my story about these nihilistic truths. So this is where my skeptics, you're going to be on guard, because what skeptics are afraid of, and I know this because I work with a majority of skeptical, cynical, nihilists, post-religious people, they're scared that right now I'm going to say, just believe that things are going to get better. Just choose something to believe in. Think positive. But I am not talking about toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. I'm talking about a way to live your life story that can withstand the horrors. And it really saved my life to rewrite my story. It reduces more suffering in the world too. So if suffering is bad, and then you not having a story to contain it increases your suffering and decreases your ability to show up in the world, you're doing it just because you're loyal to your first thought, your original story, which is just conditioning. It's more conditioning, and it's just a reaction. So skeptics are in this weird position where they have such a reaction against positive thinking based on illusion, because they see all the people doing that they'll sometimes almost cling to their original thoughts as a place of safety. But the thing is, those thoughts aren't true either. They're mostly conditioning and reactionary. So we want to go to the place in between. We're not working with your thoughts. Okay, so not working with your thoughts intentionally is to be a slave to your conditioning. Jumping into positive thinking is Delulu land. But there's a space in between that where things can be true, but also helpful and help you thrive in ways that reduce suffering in you and reduce suffering in the world. That's the sweet spot. So today, people always talk about Viktor Frankl, and I feel like he almost gets overused in this space. So I'm going to use a different story. I'm going to use the story of James Stockdale. He was a U.S. Navy pilot during the Vietnam War. He was shot down in 1965, captured by the North Vietnamese during the next 7.5 years. He was held in the infamous Hanoi Hilton as a prisoner of war. And for 7 years, he was tortured, isolated, denied basic human dignity, and yet he survived, not just physically, not just mentally, but psychologically. When others around him fell into despair or delusion, Stockdale remained grounded, and he was able to leave that experience with very low PTSD, even though he went through things that can't possibly imagine. So what he said years later when he was asked how he survived so well, he said something deeply paradoxical. He said, I never lost faith in the end of the story, but at the same time, I never confused that faith with blind optimism. I confronted the brutal facts of my reality without ever giving up hope. And that mindset is now known as the Stockdale Paradox. It's studied in psychology and leadership and trauma recovery, even business. And what this is about is the art of reframing reality in a way that's helpful without denying it. So in interviews, Stockdale was asked, sorry, I'm coming down with something. He was asked who didn't make it out of the camps. And he said, oh, that's easy. The ones who didn't make it out were the optimists. They were the ones who said, we'll be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and Christmas would go. Then they'd say, we'll be out by Easter. And then Easter would come and go. And then Thanksgiving. And then eventually they would just roll over and die of a broken heart. So let that sink in. The people who died weren't the ones who faced the horror. They were the ones who couldn't reframe it. The ones who were insisting on a version of reality that wasn't happening, and they were clinging to their denial. And when the denial finally hits reality and they have no story or container to contain that, they had nothing. And then their essentially their nervous system would shut down, and then they would die soon after. So Stockdale, on the other hand, he faced the truth. He never lied to himself about the situation. He never said, but Jesus is going to come save me. He didn't pretend he was fine, but he created a frame that was strong enough to hold all that suffering. He said over and over to himself, this is going to be a defining experience of my life. It's not going to break me. It's going to teach me. And that was his story, and his story saved his life. And so what Stockdale discovered is that real resilience doesn't come from blind positivity or rigid stoicism. It comes from holding two truths at once. This is brutal and this sucks, and this is shaping me. There's something of value here to me in the world. There's something to lean into. There's something to learn, things to witness, things to stand for, and being big enough to hold that paradox. And that paradox is the secret to surviving long periods of darkness. And for many of us who have left religion, or you've gone through loss or divorce or deconstruction or trauma, or you're just looking out at the world and the political environment that you're in, this paradox becomes crucial. Because if we deny the pain, we disconnect from ourselves and we end up in Delulu land. And when Delulu land doesn't match up to reality and reality hits it, then you'll lose everything. But if you drown in the pain, we lose the ability to find meaning. And then you're on the couch for 2 weeks crying and not reducing suffering in the world in the way that only you can. And so reframing is the art of doing both. Psychologist George Bonanno, who studies grief, I don't know if it's Bonanno or Bonanno. It's one of those words that I've only read, and so I actually don't know how to say it. You can correct me in the comments. But he's one of our major scientists on the study of grief, and he found that the people who are reinterpreting their suffering are the ones who are not only recovering from trauma, but growing after trauma. So it's not the event that predicts your mental health, it's the frame that you put around it. And so if someone has a good framework, they can withstand far more suffering and trauma than someone who doesn't have a frame that can withstand the harsh truths of reality. So you may not be a prisoner of war. You probably aren't, but you are a prisoner of something. So what's the camp that you're in this right now? And then what would it mean to say, this is a defining experience of my life. It will not break me. It will teach me, and something beautiful can come of this where I will be glad that I chose life, and the world will be better for it too. Now, I didn't have a story like that in my nihilism. My nihilism took all of it. And yet now everything good that I have in my life comes from being in that dark place and finding ways to reframe it. It's the place where I learned how to be honest with myself. I met myself so deeply that now my relationships with others are deeper. I found my voice. place. I found a calling that's meaningful to me. I created a career. Everything good that I have in my life came from the hardest thing that I've ever gone through. And it's just me. I'm not even being tortured. It's just me in bed with my thoughts. So maybe at this point you're thinking, isn't this just lying to myself? Isn't this exactly what religious people do? Telling themselves comforting stories that might not be true. What if I'm just deluding myself into feeling better? That resistance, that's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're stepping into agency. Because here's the truth. Your brain is already creating stories constantly. And do not think that you are so super rational that you are not living a story. Your brain is constructed through narrative. Your self-image is constructed through narrative. Your brain is choosing what to highlight and what to pay attention to and what to remember. And it is doing all of that without you. It is creating stories without you. So we may as well get into that process so that it can be a story that we actually want to live rather than just a story that comes from conditioning. So one of my favorite coaches, she does thought work. Her name is Cara Lowenthal. And she teaches that every human experience can be broken down to you have a thought, you have a feeling, you have an action, you have a result. And so let's take the experience of me getting fired. I was fired from my first job when I was, I think, was I 17? Yeah, I would have been 17 or 18. And it was my first big job, and it was a secretary at a law office. And it was like one of those cutthroat law offices downtown Phoenix. They were screaming at each other all the time. It was like super toxic, really big egos. And I was fired, I think, within a month or two. And my thought was, I'm not good enough. I'm stupid. This is so embarrassing. My feeling was shame and anxiety. My action was I withdrew, I avoided risk, and I also had, at the time, I had real chronic stomach issues that have now gone away, that were kind of based in anxiety. And so I had a lot of stomach issues, and then the result was it reinforced the belief that I was fragile and stupid and unfit for success. Now, over time, as you get older, I think a year or two later, I really worked on reframing that. And so I started to think that job was such a learning experience for me. It showed me that it's not aligned with who I am. It taught me where I thrive and I don't thrive. And then the feeling with that is just relief, self-compassion, self-understanding. The action is, well, I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to pursue more meaningful work. I got clarity on my strengths. And the result is I found a job that better fit me. I went to work with at-risk kids at a high school, and I loved that job when I was young. And so none of the facts of me getting fired changed. There isn't one that's more inherently true than the other. But the second one, the second reframing, gave me no stomach issues. It actually turned out that I was able to find a job that better suited me, where I was able to also be of service in the world in some way, which made the world a better place. And so both of these kind of thought patterns are true. The facts are still the same. The frame changed. And so the question isn't what is the truth, because I don't even know if humans are capable of having things like objective truths about reality. The question is, which version of the truth is going to serve your growth and your peace and your authenticity and help you to show up in the world in meaningful ways, and yet is still true. So yes, religious people use reframing to avoid pain, but we're using reframing to move through it, to be able to hold it. Religious people might reframe with the goal of obedience or submission, but we're reframing with the goal of integrity and agency. And yes, sometimes people of faith do find meaning in suffering that helps them survive. That doesn't make it faith. It just makes them human. The difference is here, we're not outsourcing meaning to a higher power. We're choosing our meaning from the inside out with eyes wide open and creating that intentionally. So the real reason why Trump getting elected this year didn't dysregulate me as much as it did last time is not because of more privilege. If anything, my financial situation is worse. The guardrails that seem to have been there last time are gone. I'm raising 4 kids in this. I'm seeing sometimes 5 nihilistic clients nihilistic, what's the point kind of clients a day. It's a lot. But the reason that I have so much more emotional regulation now is because my story is built to withstand all of that. And I know what I'm doing. I'm laser focused on my own meaning and purpose and the ways that I'm fighting authoritarianism, the ways that I can reduce suffering. I know my values. I know the story that I'm writing within that reality. I know what I witness and what I stand for. I know how I want to respond and show up. And because that feels authentic to me, my motivation came back. My depression went away. My life got better. And not in a selfish, privileged way, like, oh, I choose joy, but also in a way that helps me engage in meaningful ways. So you don't really live your life. We are not that unbiased. You live the story that you tell yourself about your life. And that story shapes everything from the way that you love and the way that you grieve, the way that you get out of bed in the morning, your motivation, your body. And it's not just poetic or abstract. It's neuroscience, it's psychology, it's existential survival. Our brains are prediction machines. So at its core, your brain is not just passively reacting to the world. We are not like pressing record on our brains. Our brains are actively predicting it. And so every second, your brain is running a complex simulation of what's about to happen next based on your past experiences, your cultural background, your beliefs, your core values, your personal story, your expectations. It's constantly asking, what's next? What does this mean? And how should I feel about it? It does this because prediction is efficient. It's how your brain saves energy and helps you be able to navigate life without being overwhelmed with every detail that's coming in at us all the time. So instead of building reality from scratch, your brain assumes and fills in gaps and anticipates outcomes. And we need to get this brain working with us rather than against us. The problem comes when the framework that you've been using to predict the world stops working. That's when things start to break down and feel terrifying. So if you were raised religious, your brain predicted comfort from prayer and moral clarity from scripture and eternal meaning in suffering. If you believed that hard work always leads to success, your brain use that to organize your future. If you believe that love can conquer all, it shaped how you interpreted conflict or abandonment. So when these stories fail, your predictions start misfiring. You pray and nothing happens. You work hard and someone who cheated gets the job. You love deeply, it doesn't fix things. And suddenly your brain is forced into this raw, chaotic present where its predictive model no longer matches reality and no longer works. And that's not just uncomfortable, that's an existential collapse for a brain. So when the brain's predictions no longer match reality, we have high anxiety. Something's wrong, I don't know how to fix it. High disorientation. Who am I if this isn't true anymore? What's going on? And often nihilism. Nothing is reliable, nothing is meaningful, therefore then nothing matters. And this is why so many people describe deconstruction as the rug being pulled out from under them, because that's literally what it is. It's a collapse of the mental model that gave you footing. So the reason this matters, it's not just like a neat little neuroscience fact. It can give us compassion for what we're going through and a path forward. You're not broken or failing. If you are in free fall, if you have no motivation, if you are shut down, your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's realizing the model that it was working with wasn't matching reality, and it needs a new model. It needs a better story, one that better matches reality and still allows for meaning, and one that doesn't require old beliefs that no longer hold up. So nihilism isn't the end, which I wish I would have known when I was in it. It's the space where your brain is stripped from all these faulty predictions and now has the chance to build something much more honest, much more authentic, and much more stable. So how do we do this? We usually do this in 5 steps. 1, recognize the story that you're already working with. Some of my narratives would have been, if there's no truth and I'm a truth seeker, I'll become so existentially bored that I'll kill myself. Like that was a thought that I was working with. And my brain was adjusting to an old framework. I got that thought from religion because religion says you need to know what's true to build a life. So I started to grab all these thoughts to see what story my brain was telling so that I could see where I could work with things. The next part is to practice reframing. Is there another way to look at this without denying reality? So for me, that was just opening up the possibility. Is there another way to build a life where maybe I don't know what's true at all? Just opening up to that possibility. So I grabbed my thoughts where I could see the narratives my brain was working with. And then just like I did with the experience where I got fired, which is just like a really simple one, is there another way to look at it that's opening my brain up to the possibility of other stories? The next part is we need some raw materials to work with to build your story. And what we need for that are resonances. What are the quotes that speak out to you? What are the movies that you love, the characters that you gravitate towards? Before we can write a new story, we need to know what matters in that story. In other words, what are your core values? Your core values aren't just things that you like, they're the internal compass points that guide your decisions and shape your relationships and give you a sense of meaning. And they're what help us differentiate between something that's difficult and something that's actually misaligned. The people who survived best in places like concentration camps could define what their core values are. Every day I'm going to try to make someone laugh. Every day I'm going to try to survive because I want to see if this person is still alive. So maybe, love and loyalty to family. They could, if they could define their core values and have it influence how they show up each day, they were more likely to survive. Your core values are not something you choose out of a list, which is great news, because when you're in nihilism, pick 3 core values, like just randomly out of nothing, that's analysis paralysis. But your core values are not something you choose. They're something that you discover. They've been with you all along. And so how do you discover what your true core values are? You start to look at 2 things. What made you proud of yourself, not just for the outcome, but how you showed up? Maybe it was a truth you told. Maybe you walked away from something. Maybe you extended some kindness when it wasn't expected. And then the other one is what deeply bothers you, what lights you up in anger or frustration or heartbreak. This one is less obvious, but just as important. So if betrayal makes your blood boil, loyalty maybe is a core value. If injustice feels unbearable, fairness or dignity might be central to you. If shallow conversations drain you, maybe you value depth and authenticity. So we don't have to be ready to write your story yet, but we can gather and build your inner archive. What lights you up? What feels like truth, even if you can't explain why? What gets you angry? What stories do you gravitate towards? What are the quotes that seem to speak to something deep in you? What are the movie scenes that make you cry? Or stir a longing that you can't quite name? What are the stories of people, real or fictional, whose lives feel meaningful to you? Songs, poetry, even TikToks that make you pause and think, yes, more of that. We don't have to analyze any of that yet, but you just gather it, kind of like a digital scrapbook or a private Pinterest board. They're not aesthetic choices, that they're clues, they're breadcrumbs. They're how you start to notice your own internal compass, the one that has been muted under layers of shoulds and societal expectations. So I not only grabbed my own core values and quotes in movies and characters, but I also researched story arcs, heroine's journey, hero's journey, wounded healer, phoenix story, other ways that people have created meaning even in hardship. And then the next part 4, is actually writing your story, that no matter what is going on in the world, no matter what happens to you, this is my character. This is what I'm creating. This is what I'm witnessing. This is what I'm building. This is what I'm growing into. This is what I'm resting into, whatever it is. And then we start to catch our old thoughts and replace them with our new frame. Often this can be accelerated with psychedelics, where you can get some neuroplasticity to help this ability to transcend your default mode network, ego brain, and be able to break old thought patterns to introduce new ones. If someone was in absolute suicidal nihilism and I, for whatever reason, just wanted to take them from point A to point B, the fastest way in the data that we have to do this is psychedelics in conjunction with integration therapy, specifically narrative therapy, and rewiring your brain to get it to work with you rather than shut down because its models don't work. And then the last part is you have to start living it. What would the character I'm trying to build for the story show up today or in this situation? It also means working with your resistance. We have a cognitive bias called the invisible cage, where we see that other people are able to change their lives and have agency, but not us. So if you're reading a book, you're like, why don't you just leave this guy and pack up and move? But when it's our life, we feel judgment, we feel pressure. There's the safety of the status quo. And it means that we have this bias where we see everyone else as having freedom, but not us. So we have to actually start living our story and working with the resistance that comes up. So my life now isn't perfect. I'm raising 4 children in this world. It's terrifying. The country seems sometimes like it's at the brink of collapse. I still don't think there's any inherent meaning of the universe. I don't believe in God. I don't really believe that it's all going to be okay. I don't think secularism will win over religion. I don't think we will ever outgrow what evolution created us to be. Superstitious, power hungry apes, whatever we are. But now I have a container for all of that, and I know how I'm responding to it. I know I can verbalize not only my own story within this, but now my brain does it on its own, and it takes very little effort from me, which means just incredible amounts of emotional resilience. I'm not in a concentration camp, but I was definitely in a prison of my own mind where I wanted to die, and I don't feel that anymore. So if you made it to the end of this video and you're thinking, I need this, I got you. I've spent the last month digging into all the research, the stories like Viktor Frankl and James Stockdale and others, and I put it all into a 5-module course where I break down the 5 steps that I talk about, and I give you a workbook, a video, and a workbook for each section so you can go through what this process is for you. And for the naysayers who say you're just capitalizing on the meaning crisis in order to make money, if I really wanted to make money, I would start saying tomorrow that I'll give you an astrology reading. I made more money teaching seminary. I will give as much free content as I'm able to. But in order to do what I want to do here and not have to go work another job, which means religion wins by default because they can ask for money, but people expect you to work in spirituality for free. And so we can't feed our families. That's not particularly fair, because I do have a lot of education in this space and a lot of experience in this space. So this is a $50 class, which is very reasonable for the time that I put in and the value that it's giving to you. And it's the best way to support my work, but it will also help you. I've already released the course on TikTok and gotten some rave reviews so far on how helpful it is in calming your nervous system when you feel like you just want to give up, because what's the point? Because if you can create a story, even when the world seems to be collapsing, then your nervous system is able to withstand quite a bit, and you're able to focus on the story you want to create regardless of what's going on. And that is what continues to motivate me and get me excited and enjoy things, even if it's not necessarily optimistic, even if the nihilism and death and all these things are still there. They're still facts in the story, but I've reframed how I'm showing up in relation to it. So I do go through in the course, I do give everyone, I didn't want to necessarily put this out on social media because it's quite personal, but I did write like a 2-page, like what that story is that I'm living by. So that's also in the course. I wanted to save that for people who bought the course, just because it is vulnerable to kind of put that out on social media. But the link is in the show notes in my Stand store, and I will see you next time where we will be doing the top cognitive biases that we meet in religion and spirituality, and how to see through those illusions and recognize them so that you can stay safe in your spiritual journey, whatever, or life journey if you don't like the word spirit, if you don't like the word spirituality. Once you have the tools to be able to see cognitive biases and see unhealthiness and see superstition and see some of the negative sides of the spiritual space, then you're able to walk anywhere. You're able to practice in any kind of ism, in any kind of religion, in any kind of new age space. I explore all of these spaces. I'm a part of many spaces because I have the tools to be able to draw out the resources without getting caught in the dogma and the bullshit and the spiritual bypassing and the cognitive biases. So I'll be doing kind of the top cognitive biases that we're going to see in religion, which is super helpful and also really great for if you're still deconstructing aspects of a religious brain. So I'll be doing that. And check out the show notes for the class. Already getting some rave reviews that it's really helping people redefine their meaning and purpose without giving up because of the horrors. So I'll see you next time, and that's it from me, Britt.